Jamye Wright, Pastor Emeritus, Trinity United Church of Christ, Chicago, Illinois. Raised in the home of a pastor who was from Virginia, and because he was from Virginia, he was well aware of the Hampton Ministers Conference, a conference that was designed almost 100 years ago now, I think 98 years ago, for clergy persons of Virginia, North Carolina who didn't have a chance to get to seminary. And having grown up in Virginia, he would go every year, and he started taking me when I was 9 or 10 years old every year with him. And it was a conference back then, it did not exceed 350, maybe 400 people at the most. A week-long conference that had worship in the morning, classes right after the morning worship, classes in the afternoon, and worship in the evening. But the classes were small. Classes were taught by professors from Virginia Union University, from Howard University School of Divinity, from the ITC, Johnson C. Smith, Charles Harrison Mason, Church of God in Christ, professors of homiletics. We have classes on ethics, classes on Old Testament, New Testament, classes on homiletics. Fred Streets, I just spoke to Fred a few minutes ago. Fred was one of our lecturers one year while we were still in Coburn Hall and the small pardon me, not Coburn, that's Virginia Union, Ogden Hall at Hampton University. Well, as Hampton University Ministers Conference grew, we lost the capacity to have dialogue with our professors. We lost the capacity to have real classes which were small enough for you to engage with the professors, not only during class session hours, but throughout the week. We're up to now 6,000 ministers, 4,000 musicians every year, and there's no chance for dialogue. There's no chance for interchange, no chance for what John Kinney of Virginia Union calls sidewalk theology, where you learn more between the Ogden Hall and the cafeteria at lunchtime than you could in a whole semester's worth of work. And Freddie Haynes and I talked for years, 7 years to be exact, about how to do that, how to replicate that. We didn't want in any way to try to compete with Hampton University. We wanted to have a small conference where small groups of people could interchange with the professors, spend a week with them, talking around the edges, talking over meals, talking not only 90-minute segments in class, but talking after class, talking at breakfast, talking at lunch. And we were looking at a wide range of subjects, like the old Hampton Ministers Conference used to have ethics, preaching, homiletics, Old Testament, New Testament, history of Christianity, history of religions. And Freddie and I were imagining and dreaming who we would ask to be at our conference to teach homiletics, especially homiletics, as both he and I, Freddie and I, lived through that era where the kind of preaching Samuel DeWitt Proctor did, the kind of preaching I grew up hearing, the kind of preaching that Gardner Taylor did, that Sandy Ray did, that my dad did, that my uncle, Sam Proctor's pastor in Norfolk, Virginia, the Bank Street Baptist Church did. We weren't hearing that. We weren't hearing it anymore. As a matter of fact, the very year that God blessed us with Ava Carruthers, not the very year, pardon me, the very weekend, one of the questions that was asked at the Tavis Smiley, Tom Joyner, State of the Black Nation, C-SPAN, all day long television program, was, why don't we hear preaching like we used to hear when Martin Luther King was alive? And they played a clip from one of King's sermons. In fact, I think it was a clip from Beyond Breaking the Silence, the sermon that he preached April 4th, 1967 at the Riverside Church. And the way the questions were asked in that old Tavis Smiley, Tom Joyner thing, they would ask the question, and at the very end of the question they say, how do you answer that, Mr. Wooten? You find out at the end of the question was directed at you, and they said, Jamye Wright? And I said, well, Dr. King went to Crozier, Morehouse first, undergrad, then Crozier Theological Seminary, then Boston. And at Boston, he got a PhD, and the preachers that you hear on television today, and the ones you're asking me, why don't we hear what we hear or heard when King was preaching, they haven't been anywhere near seminary. And that started a big brouhaha. But it was at at that conference and at that television C-SPAN thing, the whole issue of denigrating the mind, making it an either or, either you're spirit-filled or you have intelligence. No talk of a both and, that you can be both. That Freddie and I have been talking about helping young preachers to know, yes, you can. You can. I grew up hearing E.D. McCrae. E.D. McCrae was one of our professors at Virginia Union and pastor of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church. Sam Proctor pastored and was a PhD. I knew of a genre of clergy where they combined head and heart, as Howard Thurman said, and that's what Freddie and I wanted, and we wanted that model held up for younger preachers because they were hearing this either-or thing. Either you have the Holy Spirit and you have God to fill you with the Spirit, or you hear dead, dry, academic, intellectual, left-brain, cognitive lectures that pass themselves off as sermon. That's not how I grew up. That's not how Freddie grew up. And we wanted a conference that would train clergy how to do both. And we wanted to expose them to more than what the average pastor's conference, fundraising, ushers. We wanted to talk about church management. We wanted to talk about how to pastor a church, not just how to preach on Sundays, but how to be engaged with the people of God in pastoral ministry, how to know when to make referrals when people came to you with serious issues that you, as even with a seminary degree, a Master of Divinity, you're not a trained therapist, and you need to know when to make a referral. So we were talking about that kind of, putting that kind of conference together. For 7 years, both of us were pastors, however, and both of us did not have time to do anything other than dream with each other and talk about what we would do what we would do if we had, we ought to get Prathia Hall Wynn to teach homiletics. She was one of the first African-American Baptist pastor called to a church. Prathia died. Miles Jerome Jones taught homiletics at Virginia Union. Awesome brother. All right, we're going to get Miles. Miles died. And Freddie said, we're getting older, we're not doing anything about it. I said, but I don't have the time. You don't have the time. And that same weekend of the Tavis Smiley, Tom Joyner State of the Nation thing in Detroit, Freddie and I were having dinner before going to the mayor's reception the night before the C-SPAN program, and Dr. Carruthers walked in. She was a member of the church I was serving. She had just recently been engaged as the Urban Ministry Foundation's CEO. First thing she did was order an audit. And she brought me the audit for me to look at, and I was sitting there with Freddie and looking through the figures, and I saw Christian Education Conference. I said $50,000. I said, wait a minute, you mean to tell me you pulled off that Christian Education Conference that Urban Ministries has for $50,000? She said, yes. I said, well, if me and Freddie give you $50,000, can you pull off our conference? And we laughed. She said, are you serious? I said, we're very serious. And as a result, she said, okay, let's talk about it. So Freddie and I set up a time. We called Dr. Carruthers for this conference call, trying to plan when we were going to do it, the best month of the year, Black History Month, honoring the ministry of Samuel DeWitt Proctor, honoring the ministry of those cut from that same cloth of social justice and the plight of our people, that after the hallelujahs, which we enjoy, after the praise, which we love, after good, powerful preaching, which we strive to be, we got 6 days to live in the black community. And churches and members, as Carter Taylor used to say, you're looking out every Sunday into a sea of pain. What are we doing about that? My preaching about Johnny can't read doesn't help Johnny read. How do we engage the educational system? How do we help Johnny, as well as take on the structure of the Board of Education and individual schools? How do we go into the schools to make a change? All those kind of practical nuts and bolts things. So we called Dr. Carruthers, all excited, and she said, progressive young liberal pastors, where's the female leadership in this conference? Dead silence on the phone. She said, well, call me back when you get a female. Click. Hung up on us. We asked, initially we asked Claudette Copeland, who was at the time wrestling with cancer, battling chemotherapy and radiation. She physically did not have the strength. Then we thought back to the day we had the conversation in Detroit at the hotel. In that restaurant right across from us, Carolyn Knight and Cynthia Hale were sitting, and we were looking for pastors, female pastors. Carolyn Knight is an excellent preacher, but she has no money. That's not putting her down. She was on the faculty of a seminary. We couldn't ask the seminary for money. We could ask my church for money. We could ask Freddie's church for money. We could ask Cynthia Hale, she got a big church. Let's ask Cynthia. We asked Cynthia, and she said yes very graciously. And she and Freddie became the co-chairs. And we called Ivor back. We got 2 co-chairs, 1 male and 1 female. And we began making plans then for the first conference, which was held in Atlanta. We've been in every city 2 years, except, I think, Jacksonville. Only 1 year in Jacksonville, the other year in St. Petersburg, Florida. But 2 in Atlanta, then 2 in New Orleans, right after Katrina, 2 in Chicago, and now this is the first of 2 in Dallas. In the initial years, the first 7 to 8 years of the conference, we had also mid-year what we call legislative days, where we would go up on Capitol Hill or go to Washington, D.C. and meet on Capitol Hill with our legislators, particularly members of the Congressional Black Caucus, to talk about policy issues and how we could impact policy because of the decisions that were being made. We got that model from both Tyrone Pedge, Progressive National Baptist Conference, from the United Church of Christ, which has paid Office for Church and Society, who monitor legislation and see what legislation fits in with our denominational stances on issues and which go diametrically opposed to it, because we wanted to engage the legislators on those issues like the day of immigration or No Child Left Behind, as opposed to Race to the Top. And those legislative days were like 2 to 3 days, which complemented what we do in a national conference like this one, where we have a chosen theme for the year. We had a chosen theme each year for legislative days also. That's a brief synopsis of a 10-year journey that we've been on, trying to, and Dr. Carruthers, of course, not enough can ever be said about her. Dr. Carruthers took our little ball and ran with it, got in touch with seminaries, over 127 seminaries at this year's conference. Persons who come for the week, they have a dean, an academic dean recognized by ATS, Association of Theological Schools, the accrediting body for seminaries in this country, who gives assignments to the seminarians, papers that they have to write, things that they have to do to meet the requirements for this week to be a full course for them, like an intensive course, a J-term course where they have 40 contact hours with the professors. That's exciting for us because it exposes seminarians to what we've been talking about. Not just getting the tapes or getting a CD or getting a DVD, but having the opportunity and the ability and the experience of being in session with different professors and being in worship with different leaders, youth, and if you notice tonight we had a seminary. We wanted not just old folk pouring down on the young people, we wanted to show male and female. So we try to have as many female preachers as we have male preachers, try to have as many young preachers, so it's not the old people's conference and they think, let's go hear what the old folks are doing. We want them and we want their ideas. We do that also on our board. We have young persons represented on the board of trustees, and we're trying to put in place an organization that will live on past our lives. I am in my 70s. Dr. Carruthers is close up behind me. We're not going to be here 3 or 4 or 5 more years. We want to turn this over and make sure that it's going on and ongoing in the future, so that future generations of African Americans, Africans living in diaspora, Africans living in the Black Atlantic, can be a part of a global community that does not separate social justice from the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God that makes us feel good and makes us worship, makes black worship unique, but also the same Spirit that prods us to do things to make a change. As one of our members used to say, Judge R. Eugene Pence, Jesus did not come to earth to make heaven a better place. And he taught us to pray, thy kingdom come on earth. Now that means we got to make some changes. We're challenging this kingdom. It's not God's kingdom on earth. And we want to make sure that that goes on into the future and that young people catch that vision. That's what Sam Proctor preached. That's what Sam Proctor lived. That's the kind of life and ministry he modeled for us. And that's what we want to see ongoing into the future. You ask the nation right now. Unfortunately, because of media, the nation knows Creflo Dollar, Eddie Long, T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen. Nation doesn't know Sam Proctor. They don't know anything at all about that powerful combination of head and heart, social justice, what he did for the Peace Corps, what he did in Africa, when he lived in Nigeria, what he did as an advisor to President Johnson, as a friend of the Kennedys. They don't know that aspect of his ministry and his life. And we want to make sure that the nation knows that it might not ever happen because it doesn't have popular appeal in terms of media, but we want to make sure it has ongoing substance and sustenance when it comes to the life of the black church in the 21st century.